Remember to sign in on the document if you haven't already. Definitely see folks who haven't. Do we have, sorry, Jesse, didn't mean to volunteer you there. I just copy pasted that. Do we have a volunteer to take notes today? Or should we just try to write things down as they come up?
I think I'm a fan of just taking notes of like action items or important notes, not a full scribe. So I think if we all work on that, that'll be good enough.
Sounds good. Introductions. Do we have any new faces today? Anybody want to introduce themselves? I think I've seen everybody before. So move on to, so today we're going to do something a little different. For the first 30 minutes, we're going to do a roadmap review. Based on the roadmap review, kind of first part of our roadmap review, we did at the core team sync, yesterday. We are going way there. And then for the rest of the meeting, we'll just do the normal working group meeting and talk about RFCs. I think that's what we decided yesterday. Is that right?
Yeah, should we do the release planning stuff?
Gonna do that first? Yeah, sure.
That should be quick, right?
I think so. Any updates?
There's nothing in particular on the platform side. Still working through a lot of issues and PRs into pack.
And on the implementation side, I think it's a similar story. We had our sub-team sync yesterday, and we decided that we're going to try and see if we can get ARM support in the next release, because it might be very close.
Awesome. Any distribution learning Buildpack author updates?
In the last BAT team sync, we went over the redesign document for the new version of libcnv. Let me try and find the link for that. But we talked about a bunch of stuff, and I think I'm supposed to extract some of the things that are outside of the scope of libcnv and talk about that in the future working group or office hour meetings. But there's the document in case anyone's interested.
Sounds good. Any updates from other sub teams? Seems like no. So we will move on to roadmap review. I see people already copying a couple things into there. Should we go back to the doc we were working in yesterday and keep working there, or do we want to copy things into this doc?
I just went ahead and copied it over to continue. I'm assuming that there would be an action item for somebody to go and create a new draft of the proposed changes to the roadmap. So that individual would probably look at both areas.
Sounds good. So I think we left off, we decided that we were not going to add ARM support. And then the next topic was registry. Something registry.
Yeah, so I put this on here, proposing this be added to the roadmap, and what I have in mind, right, does kind of tie into the registry, but at a high level, right? It's about discoverability. It's about from a app user, or sorry, a user's perspective, them wanting to say, okay, I want to build a Java application, right? What build packs can I use? Like they can go to the registry right now, but then that tells them what build packs they can use, but it's not really cohesive to tell you, okay, this is the builder that you select and these are the stacks that you could choose from. That sort of information isn't yet available. So it's that piece that I feel is missing, and there does seem to be some traction behind it, but we're not putting enough focus on it in my mind that as much as we should. At least that's my opinion.
I think the,
Go ahead.
sorry, go ahead. I think the stacks are there, but I feel like stacks are not sufficient information to do anything with. It's more like, here you go. The builder, yeah, I'm not sure if you're driving anything specific, but like, definitely, I think the builders have a place. I'm not sure if going from a build pack to a builder. Well, I guess if builders are a first class thing, we could like cross reference or cross link those without people providing information, right? So we could say, if people register their builder, then we could add a list of builders for the build pack without anybody else providing other information. So yeah, it seems like part and parcel with having builders in the registry.
Yeah, and then there's details on how we could improve like the association, right, between builders and build packs and how to make it more easily usable. But I think, at least for me, it's that aspect, right? It's how easy is it for the users to say, I want this, and then go to the registry and find it. And I think right now it's almost near impossible. Like they need a lot of hand holding and investigating, where that shouldn't be the case, right?
A lot of builders are language specific. And so if you're like, you wanted to find a builder to build your Java app, right? That might be the more useful thing than finding a bunch of build packs that you could use together to build your Java app. And their associated stacks and all of that. So I definitely support that. Making builders more accessible through the registry.
Yeah, I mean, I do too. I think like the Heroku build pack design is a little bit different, and like in that the Heroku Java build pack is a meta build pack with all the various build packs that go into it. But yeah, definitely the water is getting muddy. Like if you search Java, you end up with a bunch of like the finer grain build packs that are the Paketo stuff, and it's hard to know what to do with them. Like, do I need the Java native image build pack?
I mean, should we bubble up meta build packs higher in the priority list? That's probably what they're searching for.
Yeah, do we denote, like, I guess what I envision is you search for Java, right? And then it brings up a whole bunch of stuff, but it denotes like, okay, these are builders, this is a meta build pack, this is a regular build pack, right? And then you kind of filter out, and yeah, maybe we have priority for some things over other types. But then, you know, again, if I were to just land on a build pack, then I would want more information of how to actually use that build pack, right? And like, these are the builders you can use it with if you're using it through pack or something like that. Again, I don't know the specifics right now, but it's more about that journey for the user.
Yeah, we don't denote.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, we don't distinguish meta build pack and non-meta build pack. But I think the idea for like the Heroku Java build pack, you know, like obviously like the Heroku build pack design, I think was kind of created as though like the builder was just a detail, and the unit of distribution was the meta build pack. So the instructions here are like complete in the sense that this would work with any of the supported stacks. So you could create your own builder with this build pack, or you know, or whatever. You don't need a builder, and that's fine. I still agree that there's a lot lacking in terms of like how, you know, how do I go forth and use this? That like the command there, I think, is not sufficient to educate people.
Is it a roadmap item though for 2021?
Oh, yeah, okay, sorry. So I don't think it needs to be. Like, I think this is something that we can, it seems like smaller in size than a lot of our other roadmap stuff. Like, this is definitely something we can work towards, even if it's not on the roadmap. So I guess I'm fine with it, but it might make sense as like a sub thing of a more North Star type roadmap item. I don't know if we have anything like that, but
Docs.
That's why I was proposing discoverability, right? Or user journey or something along those lines. Maybe, I don't know if you would want to put it under documentation, right? But and the reason why I propose for it to be in the roadmap is again, because I think we've all mentioned what we've stated here, but we haven't put enough focus on it. And I'm proposing that we do put that focus on it.
I think I agree that that getting started experience can like it's very impactful, right? People hear about the project, they go to the website. If they can't, figure out how to use it and understand it in a short period of time, they're not going to engage. But to me, it maybe still goes under documentation, and it's just maybe we need to clarify that documentation doesn't just mean command line arguments and things like that, but really that full getting started experience.
Yeah, I think we want to do that. We should probably not just call it documentation. We should change that first roadmap item if we want to rope
documentation and onboarding or something like that. Or discovery.
If we're expanding the scope of that first item, there's also the intro video that Yael has done a lot of work on to try to better explain what Buildpacks are at the first kind of point of contact. That might be something that furthers that goal as well.
Definitely seems like it fits to me.
Yeah.
So maybe the outcome is rename documentation to be more inclusive of discovery and onboarding efforts.
Cool. Do we want to vote on that?
Yeah,
Last time.
sounds good. 3, 2, oh, sorry, for people who didn't attend last time, thumbs up means you're okay with, I guess in this case, you're okay with the decision, want to move forward with it. Thumbs down is have questions or think we should keep talking about it. 3, 2, 1. Vote. See all thumbs ups, I think. So Javier, if you want to add that there, awesome. And then we will move on to governance and subteams.
I put this on here because I feel like we've spent some time this year just talking about governance, kind of expanding, trying to push more towards subteam RFCs. There was the talk of that Ben brought up of we haven't done it, but there's been discussions of potentially laying the groundwork for the kind of TOC / like governing board kind of discussions. And then also just the change in kind of the meeting structures and things like that I feel like there's just been a focus on, maybe it's not governance, but just like kind of just restructuring the project to be less single point of failure on the core team level.
Is that still like, is that aspirational? Are there things that we still plan to change more significantly that we haven't changed yet? Or do we feel like we have a grasp over the changes we want to make, or that we've made many of them already?
I think we made a decent amount of them, but there's still probably more. I don't know if we'll get to it this year, but there's definitely stuff around probably the governing board that we need to do more research and figure out what other groundwork we can get lay there. Probably also the discussion of like other companies and kind of having a governing board that can kind of reach out and work with other companies as well.
Is that kind of like, goal to get, I guess, more contributors into the project from, more than 3 or 4 companies, part of that item, or is it really just more around the governance?
I would expand it probably to that. Like, I think the efforts that folks on the project have done with mentorship and other things of growing the project is a big reason to do these changes, right? But whether that should be a roadmap item or not is, potentially up for debate, but I think we're going to do it regardless.
Trying to think of how to describe. I think I have a good grasp of what you mean, but what would the title be? It's like, it's not adopters. It's not exactly growing the contribution team. It's like
scaling the project to some degree, right?
Yeah. Or scaling our process or something like that. It's definitely something we talked about a bunch. Does anyone have thoughts on whether we should add that as a roadmap item, or we could just vote?
For me, I'll be honest, it's still a little unclear as to whether or not this is worth adding to the roadmap. Just because I feel like it's always continuously going to happen. And I don't feel like there's been a lack of effort there. But maybe that's just my driving force as to why it would be added to the roadmap.
I just think it's a thing that we've put more time and attention to potentially this year than we have in the prior 2 years. I won't be super sad if we don't add it. Like, it is definitely not a hill I'm trying to put out there. Because I agree, like, I think we will continue to do it, but I kind of just want to call out. I think it has been a kind of project-wide effort kind of thing that we maybe it's more of, I think, highlighting the work that is being done by lots of folks on in the project.
I think for some of these, something that gauges my opinion about it is whether we could make significant progress by the end of the year. And for this, it kind of feels like maybe we could, or we've talked about making changes shorter term rather than longer term. But I don't know if everybody feels like that's realistic. We'll take a vote and see what people think. All right, 3, 2, 1. Sorry, thumbs up for. I should explain first. Thumbs up for yes, this should go in the roadmap. Thumbs down for no, we should keep talking about whether it belongs in the roadmap or you don't think it should go on it. 3, 2, 1, vote. All right, folks who voted no, you want to start?
I just voted no. I just don't think it needs to be on the roadmap. It's just my thoughts. We've got enough on the roadmap. Doesn't seem like I need it for me.
Yeah, I agree with Jesse.
One trend there is I think most of the kind of core team people voted yes, and then maybe more of the sub-team folks voted no. I don't know if that's something to point out. It's like, I think
I'm only
time
voted
constraints.
neutral for what it's worth.
More from a timing perspective. I feel like maybe the core team is voting yes because we feel the pain of some parts of our current governance structure a lot. I'm more neutral because I could see us like really leaning into this in 2022. I don't know if there's something that we're doing now that I would say I would put down to do this instead in the remainder of 2021. But I don't feel strongly. Like if other people really wanted to push for it, I'd be very supportive of that and engage in it. So neutral.
I feel like I would reframe it slightly to be more about like operational efficiency, because I think that's kind of what we want out of it, right? And I know that some of the synchronous nature that we, you know, that we work with, it's kind of been a pain point. So I sort of feel like, and we also talked about, you know, if there were to be this change in governance structure, it wouldn't happen immediately, right? It might just happen with like changes to the way meetings happen, or like this meeting is for this purpose and this meeting's for this purpose, kind of separating those out. So I feel like those are all things that could be sort of done incrementally and made progress on, you know, before we formally do this like change in governance. So I guess I voted no, but I kind of voted for like, no, don't maybe expand it or soften it a little bit to include some of the other steps that we've taken to make things more efficient. That's all.
I guess, Terrence, do you feel like operational efficiency covers what you're getting at, maybe in a little more broad way?
Yeah, I mean, I think governance is not the right word there from just the discussion. I think like, yeah, like operational efficiency, scaling the project, which I think is also a very broad kind of phrasing, is probably what I meant or was going for. But yeah, I don't know. This came from brainstorming in like the span of 3 minutes, I guess, yesterday. So trying to find the right words was hard.
Got it. So we have, I think 1 minute before we're going to transition over to the regular working group meeting agenda. We'll do one more vote over this as operational efficiency. And, you know, in the end, unless there's a lot more discussion, I think the core team votes will be binding because core team says the roadmap. Ready? But everybody can vote. 3, 2, 1, shoot. Looking for Joe and Javier. Cool. Seems like that was all thumbs up. And so I think with that rephrasing more towards operational efficiency instead of governance, that makes it in. And I think now we have, that was the last item we said we wanted to consider for adding. If folks want to take a look at progress last time over the previous items, here's the sub-team sync. You can look at the one from last time for what we said we would do for the current roadmap items. And then at some point, someone will take those and update the community doc.
Yeah, I'm summarizing or aggregating everything below it in our current notes right now, but I could take the action item to at least start the PR and just get people's input.
Awesome, thank you so much. That would be really helpful.
Didn't we assign out some sections yesterday for like specific things?
I think we did. We needed Ben's input on one thing. there was some wording that might need to get updated, but I think that could happen through the PR, Javier, if you want to, if you're going to open, and then folks can make suggestions into that. All right. Any other roadmap related things, or should we jump into 181? All right, Sam, take it away.
So this was an RFC I put in last week around unlocking a use case that allows Buildpacks to write layers which do not reside in the /layers directory or the app directory, with the semantics being that these additional layers would behave roughly the same as the app, like workspace-based layers, where in terms of the layer lifecycle, where they get blasted away each time, and if you want to preserve them, you have to put it in some layers, create some links, and launch layers stay the same, and whatever else. The main motivation behind this is there are a bunch of use cases where you want files or other things in certain directories, and these directories are, like, for all intents and purposes, rebasable, and you also don't need root privileges to put files there necessarily. So some examples are like any opt specific directories, which are like standalone, like AWS Lambda extensions, or like if you want to put it in some other opt directory which has its own like entire directory structure, including dependencies. Same thing for like user configs. Typically, lots of software requires you to have config files in the user's home directory. So instead of like manually generating these during runtime using an execd script, you could just reserve it there, and then that would be it. The idea was to use like the volume directive in Docker files when creating your stack images, or like after the other RFC, you could also use the same directive with the whole Dockerfile extensions thing, where like you could detect which directories are supposed to be volumes, and you could dynamically like add them to your stack, or whatever the equivalent of stack comes out to be. The usefulness of having volume directives is that if a directory is declared as a volume, it discards any changes that may have occurred on it from like subsequent run commands. That can be a good thing as well as a bad thing, because the bad thing is people sometimes run Dockerfile run commands and those changes get discarded without them knowing it. But it also means that if you do it at the beginning, you know that your image would definitely be replaceable because there won't be any content in there. And also it's a good signal for like if you're using pack to create your image, like Docker locally, if there is a volume directive, will mount necessary volumes there. So if someone's creating layers or writing files, that'll be faster. Same thing for something like Kpack. It could just look at the volume config inside the inside volume key inside the config and figure out which volumes to dynamically mount to the build pod. And the same thing can be applied to the run image and the build image. And apart from that, it supports the typical things we currently support for app directories, which is like slices. If you want to provide certain subparts and put them on their own layers, you can do that. And these volumes would be exported or will be available to Buildpacks by an environment variable, which is just a JSON list of the paths, which they can inspect and then decide to fail to detect or build if they don't find appropriate things. The alternative was to use environment variables to specify these volumes. One additional thing I added was specifying the workspace or the app directory in a consistent fashion so that you can use the workdir as the common instruction instead of an environment variable. But that's the gist of the RFC.
Leaving aside some details, in my mind, the two things that I would worry about here are sort of like build packs coupling to stacks and sort of the inability of very simple platforms like Tecton to support this. Which doesn't mean we can't do it, but I feel like you need, if we did it, it'd have to be a requirement that a build pack could continue to function if there were none of these volumes provided, right? It can't be a requirement.
I guess like the only reason I had included it as volumes is so that the writes are fast enough. Buildpacks could technically still write these things and the life cycle could snapshot and export these layers regardless. But this would just be an indication that these parts are fine for Buildpacks to write on. Or an indication from the Buildpack that it would like these parts to be exported.
If we're keeping with our current phase model without doing a bunch of refactoring to snapshot everything during build, I think it does in fact have to be a volume so that the export phase can see the changes, because otherwise they're gone when you start the new container, right?
Yep.
I feel like, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the other alternative that I can think of is if there is a single volume for places like Tecton, the lifecycle could possibly have an option where you provide it a single volume and it symlinks certain parts to like certain subdirectories in that volume to during the initial phases to then have the files in the appropriate places during export, or like some convention so that some parts on the single volume map to some parts in the output image. But it should be doable even with a single volume. It's just a matter of defining a convention so that the lifecycle can export certain subdirectories and certain other places in the output image.
I feel like even if we can solve for the Tecton problem, I'm still inclined to say it has to be optional, because otherwise now you're deeply coupling the build pack to a particular stack, right? That it has set these volumes, like it would not be runnable on a different stack where this wasn't provided.
So that's where I was thinking, like, that's how most of the build packs would technically work, right? Like they require some base dependencies in the stack. So if Steven's RFC goes through, they can also dynamically say that, okay, these things must be volumes, or you could expand, or you could put these instructions in your builder image and run image, and then that solves for like the dynamics, like stack coupling part doesn't solve when you provide these instructions and then your platform has to mount all of these volumes there. But I mean, all of the new stack pack stuff is very nebulous anyway. We still don't know how a platform would implement the new stuff.
Yeah.
So
I'm a bit worried because I feel like we're finally making changes to move to better Buildpack stack compatibility. Like for a while, I think Buildpacks were pretty coupled to their stacks, even though that wasn't the goal of the way the spec was originally written, with some of these changes around getting rid of make-sins and standardizing around sort of, operating system features rather than stack IDs, is to create a world where everything's more interoperable with a different base image. And this is sort of pulling things in a different direction.
I think I wrote basically the concerns Emily has in the RFC directly yesterday when I was looking at it. Not that I think this is a feature we shouldn't add, but I think those are probably concerns that we need to resolve or address. I do think Steven's RFC definitely moves us in the other direction, like Emily is saying. I think there's some stuff where a build pack that, if it does depend on this feature, is tied to very specific things in kind of, or is expecting certain things from that stack image that it's running on, even if it doesn't have a stack ID and we're not doing it that way. And potentially we need a way to expose that upfront. Like, I imagine even like if I am building a builder or something and that is an expected thing, that I should know when I basically pull that build pack in and I'm potentially building a builder for it, that volume, those volumes need to be set, right? And potentially, like if I did pack create builder and it wasn't, like we could throw an error message or something up front, something like that. And then, yeah, I think the other question I had was what is the outcome if I expect as a build pack for this to work, but like this volume to be there, but it actually isn't on the stack.
So the idea was that the build packs would be provided with the list of paths that are available as volumes, and then it's up to the build pack to either fail to detect or work around it if they want to. So if the build pack has like a workaround, it can do that, or if it sees that this is populated with the appropriate things that it's looking for, it can just pass.
Sorry, go ahead.
But I think like most of these paths would be like hard coded for each build pack, so I don't mind adding some optional metadata in the build pack toml that indicates that this build pack requires these paths, and maybe we can fail to create the builder upfront. That also works. But as far as I can see, it doesn't couple it to a stack, more so to a list of volumes. As long as any stack provides those list of volumes, it should still work.
I want to maybe take a step back from the particular RFC. I think you have like a critical use case for big platform you're building, right? That's like, you need to put stuff in opt. And this comes across as like a very well thought out and elegant way to, accomplish, to work towards solving that particular use case. Except for like kind of some philosophical questions, right? About the coupling and, maybe some questions around how we implement this on different platforms. I wonder if it's worth talking about the use case you have a little bit more first before we talk about the solution, because I don't know if everybody is aware of that, or I think in that context, things that are important about this might be a little more obvious, and we could figure out how to preserve those without causing the same problem. So could you talk a little bit about the problem you're trying to solve?
So the main thing I need is that I need certain symlinks and certain predefined paths. All of these things are rebasable, so I don't want to switch to like the new packs proposal and like lose out on like performance or anything else. Not just rebasability, but also that some of these things would have to be done beforehand in a possibly less efficient manner. So the idea was that I just want symlinks or some content in certain paths, which I unfortunately cannot migrate to like the typical /layers/app stuff. And I also want a separate layers and app directory for other things.
And so,
that's,
sorry.
but that's the generic use case, like just having some parts available to export apart from the two that are currently available.
And specifically, you need certain exact paths in opt. So you couldn't move your layers directory into opt, right? You needed to be like opt my package. Is that, yeah. Thinking about the stack packs, hooks, RFC, you're concerned about, so there's a label there that'll let you mark a stack pack as rebasable, so you could rebase out from under it, and you're concerned about performance in that case. And would it really be less performance? Sorry, go ahead.
One more thing, I want this to happen after the build process is done, which does not happen in the stack packs RFC. So I want to create some links, for example, after the build process is done to a specific place.
And you don't know what that place is beforehand. You couldn't create broken symlinks at the stack packs level and then have everything get filled in.
I mean, that's one way of accomplishing things, and that's how I imagined I would do it if this RFC wasn't there. It still doesn't feel right to me.
I agree. I just to understand the problem better, that would technically solve your problem, right? It would be fast because you'd be creating symlinks first, and then they would point to build pack locations, but you'd have this weird thing where there are magical stack build packs that create symlinks to magical build pack ID and layer locations.
I would also have to know beforehand where the layers directory is, what the convention for the build pack ID is, and I would have to be exposed to a lot of platform internals from my Dockerfile hooks in order to symlink the right things to the right build pack layers. Unless I symlink it to an app directory first, and then the build pack writes there, and then that symlink goes to the opt one.
And hypothetically, if you could run stack packs after build packs, not in the middle, would that also work?
Again, the issue is introspection into the build packs layers, and then you're having another layer that's looking into the build pack layers content and then trying to create something. So I wanted it from the build pack API so that it could control which symlinks it's creating from which place, so that there's no possibility of platform API changing and suddenly my symlinks are broken.
So if build pack, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, would it be easier if you could just create a normal launch layer, but then in the launch layer metadata, sort of specify what you want the real path to be in the final image, and the exporter can just export it at that path instead of at its normal path?
That would also work. That was something that I proposed or asked before, that why do we not allow any arbitrary paths to be exported from under layers? If you had some convention under the build pack layers, export it to, and then you provide the path there from root and it exports there.
It would allow us to ensure some level of rebasability too, because we can not do it if we found content there, right?
That would also work for me.
That worries me because it involves changing paths. So far we've been able to avoid software that gets installed in one place and then runs in another place, and that added a lot of complexity in the past older build pack APIs. So if you set up your layer in layers, build pack ID, whatever, and then as you're setting it up, you record paths into that layer, right? That internally reference the layer. Suddenly they don't work at runtime.
Then maybe it's a little bit awkward. What you can do as a build pack author is start by creating the symlink in the build container, then run your thing. So you're using the path you want it to be at, but you just have to, in your layer metadata, indicate that is a thing that you want to be done on export, like changing the path.
The path wouldn't be writable though, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Oh, the
it
place
would-
where you're putting the symlink. Yeah, I mean, you could. That's a problem. It works fine if you're just doing it afterwards, but yes, there's probably edge cases where the path that you're using on install changes what happens during install.
like, I don't think a Buildpack could create a new directory under root, for example.
I feel like we should have more flexibility, or like that. That goal is good, and we should work towards that. And if the stackback RFC doesn't provide enough, then like something to address. But I do worry about the kind of coupling between the stack and the build packs also, and having all the build packs be able to, like, they're all going to get these volume locations, and so they can all write into all the volume locations, and that worries me a little bit too. I know we already have the app directory that behaves like that, right? And so there's precedence, but it seems like if a lot of people use this a lot, you get rid of, or you might create a lot of instances where things are accidentally overriding each other, right? Everything thinks they need to install the same dependency into opt. And so multiple things, try to write to the same directory locations. If there were a common dependency that had to be installed that way, things like that. That doesn't worry me too much, but just.
I mean, it's the same for the app directory. So the opt was an example, but like it's any random path that I want things.
I don't know if this is a good idea, but instead of using the volumes directive in the Docker file, if in buildpack toml, you said, I claim these paths, and then if you say you claim those paths, then we validate ahead of time that they don't conflict with other paths. And
It's gonna be very difficult if you have like meta build packs and stuff. Like conflict with other paths, as in like paths provided by other build packs or paths on base image.
Like every build pack in buildpack toml says, here are paths I want write access to, and I want to get exported at the end. And then the builder or lifecycle verifies that the paths don't overlap, and then those locations are exported at the end, and then it's not coupled to the stack, right?
It would happen during create builder. Create builder can be smart, right? It can be like, okay, I'll add volumes for everything that any build pack on this builder wants.
Yeah, that's much better.
It only works if you're creating a builder, right? Like builders are not required. Like you can download build packs on the fly, and you'd have to do that validation then too, right?
At the end of the day, there's always a builder, whether it's being put together on the fly or not. Like, depends on what you call a builder. There isn't always a builder image you could distribute.
I just want to make sure it doesn't get pushed to like pack create builder without like, at least thinking about what it would look like to do the same validation as a platform, I guess. But it doesn't use pack.
I guess, Sam, do you have a reason to couple it to the stack? Or is there a reason why you want the stack to declare that the locations are there? Because I think it seems to be the biggest argument against it. And also, it's given your use case, it doesn't seem like you necessarily need it. That's why it doesn't matter if it's in buildpack toml. It seemed like that was maybe the first thing to change.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. It seemed like the easiest way to do it without affecting any of the other work we are currently doing. Like the stackpacks RFC could still declare volumes. The new stackpacks RFC could still declare volumes dynamically using Docker files. It would still work with the existing concept of stacks that we have. And the changes to the lifecycle, if we implemented this way, would have been minimal, at least from what I could understand. I don't know if there are some edge cases I'm missing.
I kind of don't like how that encourage you to use the Docker daemon just to add volume instructions to the config blob, right? Or like it would be an expensive operation because there'd be a real Docker file to execute, but the Docker file wouldn't need to do very much. So if you imagine people using the Stackpacks RFC just to add volumes, you know, it seems like that may be an anti-pattern.
I mean, it's an OCI config key, so it doesn't have to be through Docker. You can set it in different ways. I also propose an alternative where you could just set it using environment variables. That doesn't bother me too much. The only reason I added it as a volume directive is because of the guarantees that Docker provides, that if you declare something as a volume, you can't write on top of it anymore. So like it's literally just a volume. Your for subsequent instructions won't affect it.
Does containerd
think-
provide the same thing? Sorry.
Especially if we do this as part of Create Builder, then I'm less worried about people writing on top of it. It's more like had something happened underneath it. But I think in order to keep things simple for platforms, I'd rather get clever with symlinks than require platforms to provide a bunch of extra volumes whose lifecycle needs to be managed. Like maybe even in the builder image itself, like we create a bunch of symlinks to like paths in the layer stir or something that's already a volume.
I think at some point during the reorganization RFC, we want to figure out whether we should consolidate all of these things into a single volume anyway, right? Like if we figure that out, this would just follow.
Because there are different paths is like the other consolidation is like, oh, we'll just reorganize the file hierarchy. This we need some symlinks, but I think that's probably better for platforms in the long run, makes it less complex.
Does the builder currently generate layer tarballs at the end of the build process? Or does that have to happen by another phase?
Right now it has to happen in export.
Because if you knew at the beginning of the builder execution what paths in the file system were going to be written to, then you could at the end of the builder execution, the same container, tar those paths and move them into the layers volume. And then you wouldn't need the symlink thing, right? But it would be weird because you'd be tarring layers up outside of the export phase.
I mean, we talked about that for Stackpacks too, right? Like the Conoco snapshot, it's kind of the same thing, right? Like if you do it at the build pack phase or build phase, then you can grab all that stuff and throw it away before the next build pack.
There was also that other RFC on like tarring up layers during the build process.
Yeah, read-only layers. Sorry.
This was sort of proposing explicitly to be more like Apter than like a layer. Right.
Yeah.
Like if this was like a layer, then I think we'd be thinking about like, does it support build? Does it support launch? I was assuming that this is more like it's just like the Apter, but more of them, which means you actually wouldn't want to tar it up in between build packs, right?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the build phase, once all the build packs are done, like it's the same as the launch layers, or like however we would have done it for launch layers.
Like I think you could take what happens at the beginning of export and move it into build if you wanted like the tarring of layers. Just in general, we could do that. But I don't see that being a necessary change we need to do to accomplish any of these goals. Like I think I want things to be simple for platforms. I don't want them to have to do a bunch of logic to figure out how many volumes to provide, which means we need something fun with symlinks. fun with symlinks can't happen in the build phase because it doesn't run as root. It has to happen sort of when you're creating the image. And then the phases can handle that in their current layout.
I mean, the alternative that I can think of is you reserve some folder in the app directory currently. And if the Buildpack DOM provides a list of paths it wants to export to each of the lifecycle phases, but create the appropriate symlinks before, and then
Life
it's just
cycle phases themselves do not necessarily have permission to create the symlinks. That's why I sort of want to do it when we're creating the builder image.
I'm not sold on symlinks.
Less
I worry about the-
volumes. I don't want a bunch of volumes, which makes me think we need the symlinks.
I also don't want a bunch of volumes, but I wonder if there's a solution where we can not have volumes and not have symlinks.
I am fine with either. Either works for me.
You need something to make it writable, right? In
I
advance.
just want to make something writable and exportable. That's it. In paths other than layers and app directory.
Does the builder always run as root initially and drop privileges now? Or are there cases where it
No.
runs as
And
a
I
normal
think we
user?
want to move away from ever running it as root would
Yeah.
be the ideal.
Yeah,
I gotta drop.
me too. Thanks, everybody.